exceptions, so we don't break backwards compatibility. Is that right?
Sorry, I just like that message, like totally broke my concentration. I'm embarrassed to say. Can you say that last part?
I'm just trying to figure out like a one sentence summary of what we're deciding. So it sounds like we're agreeing that config.kubernetes.io should be used going forward for anything that is exposed through APIs. And the exceptions should be grandfathered in if in situations where it would break backwards compatibility, right?
I think that's like a good starting point. Let's document it. There's that API conventions folder. That seems like the right place to put this as a new file. It doesn't have to be a long thing, but should just say like, hey, here's what's already happening. And here's how we should do things in the future. In a way that is the most consistent with what we've already done and meets our general philosophy and goals.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm working on a pull request to add this to documentation. If anyone else is interested in this discussion, let me know. And I'll add them as reviewers.
Can you add a link to that pull request in the notes for people to access?
Sure.
Thank you.
For what it's worth, just as a random note, for KubeBuilder, I've prototyped a version. There's an alpha command that now uses a config function. It uses the CRD generator. It embeds it in a function, as well as generating the rest of the config. And I've been really happy with the results of pairing the KRM functions with Customize. It's been really good. All right, next topic.
Okay, great. Okay, so thanks, Frank and Sunil on the KRM functions. Natasha had a question that I hope that Phil might have some information on about the customized.io domain.
Yeah, it's not maintained by us. It was donated by a company called Replicated, but the tutorials are old and out of date, and people file issues in the customized repo for it. So we were wondering if there's anyone who knows someone that we can reach out to like either get it fixed or redirect to our documentation.
Jeff did. We've talked about like 2 years ago, we started the conversation with them about getting them to donate the domain. And at that point in time, they actually were very eager to give us control of the domain because they didn't want to maintain the content on the site anymore, right? And it was just a cost for them. So when we first talked to them, they were supportive of giving us the domain, which I think has to be donated through the CNCF and basically requires like paperwork to get done and a number of people to do different things. In terms of contacts, Jeff would be the best person. He was the most connected with them and the one directly involved in those conversations. I know he's out for 4 to 6 weeks. Since this has been like this for so long, I wouldn't say it's like critical urgent, and it probably could wait till he comes back, but it may be worth all the same if you have momentum on it, reaching out to just someone at Replicated. I bet you could find someone from their website to contact and ask them if they're still interested in donating the domain to us, and then we could take over updating the content.
Okay, I'll see if I can talk to someone. Otherwise, we can wait until Jeff comes back. Thanks.
You might even be able to message someone on LinkedIn. I think they post on LinkedIn occasionally. I bet you could direct message someone.
Okay.
I think Vic from who's a PM on our team, actually he knows people. He has worked with people from Replicated, so you can actually reach out to him as well. So I remember him talking about that in the past.
Okay, cool. I will ask you.
Okay,
who that
yeah,
Thanks.
You could stop by their booth at the next KubeCon. It's your last desperate attempt, I guess, if you can't get a hold of one other way.
So I think we're coming to the end of what we had for topics, and I think that we should move on to actually maybe have some quick stand-ups since we do have so much time. I know that that Nick Mitchell is here. At least I saw him earlier. Would anyone like to give a quick update on the status of CUI?
Sure. Yes. Sorry I missed the last meeting. I had a doctor's appointment.
No worries.
Howdy, everyone. So CUI, yes, we're going pretty well. We're in the process of rolling out or finishing up the 10.4 release. Good news is this release has behind it a Red Hat release, so we got a lot of bug fix help from their side to help stabilization. So that should be released soon. That also actually includes a bump for Electron that resolves some command line garbage that was spewed out every time you launch CUI. So that should be cleaned up as well. Also in this release, there will be initial support for talking to S3 via a lightweight VFS. So you can ls/S3/AWS and so on. So just some initial support for the AWS and IBM. And we can add Azure and G Cloud as well if needed. That's what supported at least initially. So, of course, a bunch more bug fixes. So that should all be coming out, hopefully in a few days. We're just fixing a few regressions now.
Great. Can we move on to the next one, Nick?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Would someone like to give a quick update on where we are with Kustomize?
I can speak to a couple points. One thing is that we merged a markdown copy of the roadmap that we brought to a previous SIG CLI meeting right into the root of the repo. So if anyone's interested in reviewing that, it is there easily to access. I can also add a link to that to the meeting notes. And another thing is that related to the code freeze, Jeff and I have been working on and honestly kind of struggling with an issue that I'll paste into the notes as well there, where GoYAML had a breaking whitespace change. And basically it changes the indentation of lists and it's not configurable. And the upstream author is super against making it configurable or undoing that change that happened very randomly within the V3 release. And the reason this is an issue for us is that this actually happened a while ago, and Kustomize bumped the version of GoYAML that they use a few months ago, I believe. And because, sorry, not Kustomize, kubectl did. And that means that the version of Kustomize that is vendored into kubectl, if the release happened today, say, would contain that breaking whitespace change. In Kustomize side, we're able to pin the old version so that we don't actually pick it up and we don't break our users, but we can't do the same in kubectl because of the way that the depths are in Kubernetes. So we've been trying to figure out a solution to that. The linked issue describes a few different options, and the option that we've been working on was to basically make internal fork within Kustomize KYAML library of version with the white space that we want, like the old way. So Jeff was basically working on making a PR to GoYAML with that change in it. And then I was going to vendor that into KYAML. Turns out the change is extremely difficult to make, and Jeff is now, as we were discussing, on leave, and the code freeze is impending. So that this is a very important issue that we're going to need to tackle. And if anyone is interested in helping out with that, we could really use it.
What's the impact of the white space changes to consumers of Kustomize? Is it like, is the concern mostly like, oh, their diffs are going to look different and maybe their tests are going to break because their tests like have, you know, static results, golden files? Or is it like this changes the semantic meaning of the contents in such a way that could impact their workloads or something like that?
I'm glad you asked, because sorry, like as a consumer of Kustomize, it actually affected us. Formatting is one of those things that's a very prominent part of user experience, right? So imagine, for example, in Golang, suddenly Go temp changes and you have millions of lines of Go written. It's just very disruptive change. And the fact that this library doesn't allow configuration of formatting is just bizarre, in my opinion. So forking it, or even going to the extreme of choosing a different library, I think should be options on the table.
Yeah, so we could definitely use help with that forking process. I don't know if you're interested in helping with that, Frank, since you're feeling the impact as well.
Yeah, we have one person at least on from Google side who actually is working on formatting as a consumer of Kustomize. Something, yeah, we can potentially help with.
That would be great. Jeff has a PR that is, well, he closed it because he wasn't able to finish the work in time. But it's basically tackling this. There's a lot of test coverage, and it just is showing that the change is more difficult to make than it seems at first blush, and it is taking quite a lot of time to actually get working in a way that we could vendor in.
So sorry, maybe going back to Philip's question, like, do we agree that libraries and tools should guarantee formatting and
good question. I want to ask that question after just a question first to understand the current state. It sounds like if we do nothing, then users will experience this change in the coup control, the customized version that is packaged with coup control. And so if we were unsuccessful in fixing it between now and code freeze, for instance, or between now and the release, like, how catastrophic is that, right? Like, you could imagine one case being like, it's so disruptive that it causes, you know, it could actually cause real harm. You would say, okay, we can't do a release until this is fixed, or something like that, right? Or we have to roll back the change of Kubernetes updating their YAML version to be the old version, right? Or like, do we need to invest? Maybe my question is like, do we need to talk to the Kubernetes code base and have that rolled back first? Or is this more like something like, if we did nothing and we rolled out as is, we'd be unhappy with it, but we wouldn't consider it like hazardous per se?
I can talk about the consumer user experience. So like someone who's using customized libraries, and you create a tool based on that. So one day you upgrade that tool and you run it, and then all your configuration, all your manifests suddenly have this superfluous formatting. So it is disruptive. It masks real changes, the real configuration changes that has some side effects that could lead to so it's pretty bad UX. I don't know how you would categorize the severity of it.
I think mostly, I think what we need to figure out is like, is it bad and we should try and fix it, or is it like we should start the rollback process for the upstream YAML library We don't have to resolve that here, but I think that's something that
I guess,
we should
yeah, personally, I'm interested in like, what is the long-term plan? Like, should libraries and tools, basically we need to like test and guarantee styling, and some like upstream library should not affect the user experience, right?
Katrina, you don't have to raise your hand. You can just tell me to shut up.
Yeah, just from the customized perspective, I wanted to say that we do think that this is a really big deal. If we were to accept this change, we would cut a version 5.0 for it, and any similar change we would consider a major breaking change for our users, because we expect that people are using this in GitOps workflows, and there are various ways that this can be extremely disruptive for them. Does it change the semantics? No, but for the purposes of a tool like this, it is a breaking change in that the ways that Frank described could cause a disruption. And there are also people who build, say, like a CD or say a CI integration that like is verifying the change against what they have committed to their repo, which is a good practice. And that is suddenly going to break for all users that are using this platform that somebody's built. People have tests, like the customized repo itself has a huge amount of tests that are intentionally brittle, so that we realize if we make this kind of if we introduce this kind of regression. So even within the repo itself, you can see the huge impact that something like this would have, even though on the surface it might seem like a minor styling issue. Cool. So to your point, like I think since we were thinking we had plenty of time and the fix was not actually as difficult, so we thought, well, let's move forward and try to get this solved. But given that it's more difficult and time consuming than we thought, I think your point that we could investigate rolling back the problem is good.
I just reach out and like, I don't know, maybe that got updated because someone ran go mod tidy, right? And it's like, you know, no one cares, right? So, or maybe it's like critical because there's like a bug in the old version that is like a security vulnerability, right? And therefore it has to be upgraded, right? So just understanding like what our options are there would be good. And if there was like a really important reason to upgrade it for the core, then pinning it on our own might not be the best solution either.
One thing I know is that with that change in GoYAML, they have included also a bunch of other fixes, especially around round tripping of comments and all. So those are sort of coupled with this indentation as well. So that is something.
In that it's like a pretty long time ago version that this change was made in. So there's a lot of fixes that have happened since, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that maybe to that point, we should try and stay close to the most recent version of the YAML library, because if we notice something, I bet it'll be easier to get it rolled back or changed if we notice it like a day after it's merged than like a year. Great. Should we move on? Is kube control the last one? The one that just got added, headers going beta in 122. Sean, you're on mute if you are talking.
Sorry about that. Katrina, are you finished with the customized update?
Yeah, that's what I thought was important to highlight. I don't know if Natasha had anything she wanted to add.
No. If you need help with anything, just let me know. I can help with this. I don't have anything to add.
Thank you.
Cool. I'll do a quick update, at least on one part of kube control. We intend to have the kubectl headers kep functionality moved to beta in this upcoming 122. I have talked to Daniel Smith of the API machinery, and we will have to perform other steps in order to surface these headers and interface with the API machinery to make these headers consumable, because they're not stored they're not logged by default. And they're also not sent to validating or mutating webhooks. It sounded like Daniel was interested in allowing that. So that's where kubectl headers stands right now. Is there any other functionality that we had planned on moving into 122 that anyone would like to bring up here?
So can you say that piece again about the headers? Was there a concern there, or are we good?
We're good.
Okay.
However, in order to get the full functionality, to get the telemetry for this headers, in order to be able to surface it in monitoring, we're going to have to do some work with the API machinery.
I see. Specifically to make by default it to be in the monitoring that's driven by API server logs or something like that. However, if you have a proxy, for instance, in front of your API servers, you still get the headers and you could export those to monitoring if you so choose.
Correct.
Awesome.
Thanks, Phil.
Well, that's great work. Like this is one of those features that I think has been something we knew we wanted to do for a while. And it's great to see it come to fruition, and we can potentially help us as a group, make decisions with like more data about how the tool is actually being used rather than speculation and anecdotal evidence.
On that note, we actually have a summer intern starting up who's going to maybe looking into some usability UX studies with CUI. Is there any sort of should we be cross-talking with SIG UX? Is there any sort of should we get them involved, or should we just treat this as a summer intern project and let the intern go crazy? Do you think there's any need to or any benefit from involving a larger audience on this?
The intern would be using, is that like a separate thing, or is that like the intern would be using this feature?
No, this is just a separate question. So on the topic of getting feedback from, on usability on our tooling, I just brought up that we have an intern starting who's going to be looking at that from a CUI angle. So thought maybe there might be some larger topics that we could help out with there.
Yeah, I'd say we've in the past, there's a number of attempts to understand, UX. I'd say there's two challenges. The first is that, the survey-based sort of how much do you like this or that sort of thing tends to be noisy. It's hard to write the questions so that you're not like you get one chance to ask the question and then you're like, oh, that isn't actually what I wanted to ask. Now I realize, like, how do I remine the data with a new context? So the survey has been limited in terms of what it's provided us. And then I think the second, and maybe where there's more possibility for improvement, is that kube control as it stands today is both an API for scripts and such, and an end user tool. And for an end user tool, like it would be great to have iterative improvement, like UX learnings, feed that back into the tool. Customers accidentally screw something up in a bad way, let's put in safeguards so that when they run that same command, like it's not as easy to run that same command in the same way or something like that, right? Which is, diametrically opposed to the notion of a stable API, which you run that command, it always works exactly the same way because the script doesn't care about the UX of the thing. And so I think probably the thing we could do to most improve the UX actually would be to make the API, if you will, configurable on the client side. And so you can opt into, for instance, a, you know, the dev or the user centric API, or the which has fewer backwards compatibility guarantees, right? That you're opting into. You're saying I'm running this on my laptop and exiting 0 and giving me an error message when we decide we don't like that particular command anymore is what I want. And so I think there's some really interesting stuff we could do there if we, you know, allowed users to just create a configuration file and then loaded that at start time and decided like how we interpret certain flags and stuff like that.
That's great. In terms of like, should we be considering injecting any, like with your headers in kubectl, should we be doing something similar in KUI? Like we're doing no usage tracking at all. And I did that intentionally. In fact, I stripped out a lot of that stuff when we did the initial contribution because I figured let's, you know, err on the side of caution. But is there something we should be doing there to help with getting feedback in terms of, you know, all the standard task accomplishment, you know, we can track mouse travel time, dwell time, whatever. Is that kosher? Like, is there anything that would help there, or is that completely verboten?
I think one thing to ask first is who is getting the data? Like in the case of the headers, right? We're sending it to the API server as part of the request, right? And so the data isn't being exported to SIG CLI. For instance, it's being exported to your API server, and hopefully we can use that to have customers maybe like we can build a tool then that allows customers to publish or something like that, right? But it's still staying within their system.
Yeah.
And it's also, I think, another thing to consider is like, is it generally useful information, right? That conceivably is not just useful for use UX. Not that it's like not good to do UX improvements, but just like, is this just data the user should have, right? In the context of like the headers, you could imagine, like we've had a user say, hey, like it's really easy to do delete namespaces -- all on what I thought was my dev cluster, but turns out my production cluster. And yeah, I should probably do a GitOps with stronger ACLs and not have the ability to do that. But turns out I do have namespace deletion privileges on my cluster, and I just like, you know, destroyed my livelihood or something like that. And you could imagine saying, okay, well, knowing the because kubectl deletes each namespace as a separate request, it's very difficult to differentiate between I want to delete this one namespace, which may be perfectly fine, and I want to delete all the namespaces, which isn't fine. So that context in the header, for instance, you could imagine someone puts a something in front of their cluster, like either a proxy, or they put maybe it would work with validating webhooks or, you know, these sorts of things. But you could say, okay, fail, delete all namespaces. And in that case, it has nothing to do with us gathering data. It has to do with giving customers the right set of information about what's the user's doing.
Yeah.
So I guess I'd start with those two.
Is
Is the user the owner of the data? And then is it like data that is generally just useful? So like mouse movements would not qualify for the latter one.
Yeah.
Right. But like from a high level, what I want to do is display, you know, all pods that are broken in my system. And I do that by doing 5 different requests. And now it's almost like a trace header. Like it's almost like cross stack stuff. And tying together stuff with context. It seems like a clear thing you could do. Okay.
Yeah, we've definitely got a request in the past for one of our use cases was for sort of more of an operator console, and they wanted to have auditing, excuse me, some sort of auditing capability on the user command. So that would be an example where a kind of tracking would actually serve an actual desired purpose, but generally speaking, yeah, it's tricky.
That one I think would qualify for both if you implemented it correctly.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Glad to have that.
Yeah, well, I'll let you know how it goes. We're still sort of shape out the project, but there, you know, so she, unlike me, actually has training and users designing user studies, things like that. So hopefully we'll be moving in a good direction there.
And it's not to say like you can't do any UX exporting of data at all, right? It's just like I think that it's harder to answer the question of what is appropriate to do if you when you're not doing it for the user themselves.
Have there been any studies at the kubectl level in terms of like, do we have a notion of what common scenarios that we should be tracking? You know, like, you know, create, wait, inspect, delete, you know, are there sets of tasks that you've established as being sort of meaningful, common, problematic? Do we have any kind of repository of those kinds of scenarios to use as?
I don't think we have. If we do, it is not based on a holistic view of observed patterns from a broad set of customers across cloud providers.
Mm-hmm.
I could imagine most likely what we would have if we had anything at all would be like, I talked to customers at a booth at a KubeCon and the customers that I talked to said they did this, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm.
Which is better than nothing, but maybe marginally so.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll let you know how it shapes out.
Yeah, I'd love to learn more, and then also encourage them to join this meeting.
Yeah, she just started yesterday, so I figured I'll let her let her get settled before we dive in the deep end too deeply. Yeah,
it's a good idea. Anyone else have any questions? Everyone just turned off their video and mic and is like, I don't know, playing Switch by now anyway. So
yeah, I think everyone's cruising by now. Okay, well, I think we can give you back the last 8 minutes. Thanks for joining us, and we'll draw the meeting to a close unless anyone has anything else to add. Okay, great. See you guys soon.